problem with The Shining, and Stanley Kubrick knew that I had a problem with The Shining. I had a discussion with him beforehand. He said, "Stephen, Stanley Kubrick here. Don't you agree that all stories of ghosts are fundamentally optimistic?" I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, if there are ghosts, it means we survive death, and that's fundamentally an optimistic view, isn't it?" And I said, "Well, Mr. Kubrick, what about hell?" And there was a long pause on the telephone line, and then he said in a very stiff and very different voice, "I don't believe in hell."
Hey, it's Dave. Welcome back to my channel. As we talked about, today's episode was going to be about The Shining. So the reason why the first clip I put there was Stephen King discussing his conversations with Stanley Kubrick is basically just to show you what Stanley Kubrick's mindset was. He didn't believe in ghosts. He didn't think the ghost stories were scary. And you might think, well, then why make The Shining? My belief, and as I posted in the beginning, this is not an original belief. My belief is that in The Shining, we are constantly going back and forth between reality and the book that Jack is writing. I don't believe that any of the stuff happened for a fact, like as the story goes. I don't think Stanley Kubrick would have believed it, and that's why Stanley Kubrick made the movie for himself. He made it so it would be. He made it so he could buy into it, and at the same time, he knew that you would find it terribly scary because he knows what makes things scary, which was the whole point of him wanting to do a horror in the first place. And then the other thing is he is constantly tipping his hand to people if you're willing to find the clues. He was very big into puzzles, and he had a very, very high IQ. I think it was immeasurable. I believe it might have been 200 or beyond the scope. Like when they say people have a 200 IQ, it's over the range. You can't test it. And Kubrick was very much into puzzles and that whole thing. And the movie is constantly tipping its hand for you. Now I'm going to show you a bunch of different things in the movie and what I believe. And then you can go and watch it and see it for yourself. I could sit here and do it throughout the whole movie and show you every little aspect of it, where I think all these different things happen. But I think it gets a little easy once I open the door for you. So I'm just gonna first I'll tell you about some things that happen, and then I'll show you some clips, and we'll go from there. So the first thing is we start the movie, and we're driving up in Jack's car, and I believe there's an overhead of the hotel. There's no maze. I don't believe that Stanley Kubrick was of the mind that he would be making mistakes. Another aspect, and I'm sorry I'm running all over the place, but another aspect of Stanley Kubrick and what people don't realize about this movie is, other than the external shots that were the helicopter shots, everything is in a soundstage. So everything is built. So if there's a door in the wrong place or these things are moving, they're moving because he wanted them moved. It's not because it was a mistake of continuity and they were filming in a different room. That's not what's happening here. So when we go into the pantry and we see things in the pantry are moved, there's no reason once that pantry is built to ever move anything. So why is things being moved? Because Stanley Kubrick wants them moved. And they make a point as to why they're being moved. I'm going to show all this. Just so you understand where I'm going with this conversation. In the film, Jack Torrance is a writer. In the very first scene, it's real. He's in the office talking to Stu Ullman, and he says he wants to use the time to get into his writing. He had some ideas. The next scene, we see Wendy and Danny in the apartment, in Denver. This scene, in my opinion, is a completely fictitious scene. It doesn't really happen. Why do I think so? Because Stanley Kubrick gives you hints that it doesn't happen, and stuff that he's always doing when a scene is being written is things change in the scene.
Tony, do you think Dad'll get the job? He already did. He's gonna phone Wendy up in a few minutes to tell her.
Now hold your eyes still so I can see. That's good. Now the other one. Good boy. Now, Danny, when you were brushing your teeth, do you remember if you smelled anything funny or saw any bright flashing lights or anything at all strange?
No?
Do you remember when you were brushing your teeth?
Yes?
Bye.
This whole scene is just being written in Jack's mind. He's in this hotel. He's writing the scene. I think the whole backstory of him beating Danny, I think it's all fictitious, part of the book. So, in fact, to back up my statement, when Jack is first being interviewed, that is the actual office. And here, let me show you. Do you notice there's no light switch on the door there to the right? Later we're going to see there's a light switch there.
Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Ullman.
This is my secretary, Susie.
Hello. Susie, how do you do?
Have any trouble finding us?
Oh, no problem at all. I made the trip in 3.5 hours.
Wow, that's a very good time. Hey, but pretty soon, Jack just...
Now that Jack is out of the way, we can see clearly the name tag and the array of the office. When Wendy goes back into the office because she wants to use the CB radio and she's talking to the police about the storm and what's going on, the office is cleaned up. Like, you can tell it was all put away from winter. Stu Ullman's name tag is missing off the desk. The office looks exactly as it did when Jack was there, other than it was cleaned up. Again, clearly we see there's no light switch. The office is completely empty. Stu Ullman's name tag has been taken away.
This is KDK.
When Jack is going crazy, which I believe is all fake, Jack goes in. You'll see outside the room now there's a light switch.
Gate 12. Do you read me?
Okay, now there's a light switch there. Where the hell did that come from? Also notice the name tag is still on the desk. This is because Jack's writing this scene from memory. Who's installing a light switch in a sound studio for no reason? It would have had to have been put there to show and signify to the viewer that we are in Jack's mind. Now he goes in, Stu Ullman's name tag, and the place looks exactly the way he left it when he saw it. So he's writing it from memory. He just remembered it wrong, that the light switch was there. There's so many other types of scenes. When Dick Halloran opens up the cooler to show them the frozen meats, he opens the door on the outside. You can clearly see there's a huge kitchen, an open kitchen behind him. He opens the door, and then from inside, you can see he's opening the door's opening the wrong way. At this point now, we are entered into Jack's story again. We're out of reality into Jack's story. This is when he calls him Doc. Any level of shining, anything to do with shining, is purely fictional in the story. It's all Jack writing it. And then he comes out of that cooler, and you can see that it's they're not even in the same room. You don't even know where the hell they are. This is a soundstage that he built. He wouldn't come out of that room and not film the exterior exactly the same unless he didn't want to. This is a completely controlled environment for Stanley Kubrick. So he knows exactly where everything is and what it means. So now they go into this dry storage. And again, Dick Halloran is talking to Wendy. He turns around and looks at Danny and asks him if he likes ice cream in the shine, right? He's shining at this point. Right above his head is Tang and Kool-Aid. There's the Kool-Aid again. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. This scene is fake. Now they're going to walk out of their room. As he shuts the door, you can see now they're back in like a kitchen area. And also, if you look in the door, you can see that the Kool-Aid's not there. It's just Tang. How come that all of a sudden disappeared? What if somebody in this fictitious hotel need Kool-Aid and they ran out of 5 quarts of Kool-Aid?
Right here.
Notice he opens the door. It's going to open from the right, but now when you see it open, he actually opened it from the left. This is because we're now entering Jack's story.
10-pound bags of hamburger.
Jack's writing this in his mind while these two are going on tour with him of this.
Mr. Halloran, how'd you know we call him Doc?
Beg pardon?
Now, when we go in here, you have to understand all this is here for what's left over for the winter, but it's a sound stage. So this is all built to be there. Everything is placed for a reason. When Jack goes in later, it's not going to look the same because Jack's going in and writing it from memory. He's not even here at this scene, but at some point he's had to have gone in. So now we look. There's going to be the shine. Is this real or fake? Or the tip-off? There's Kool-Aid above his head next to the Tang. I'm telling you, don't drink the Kool-Aid. This is not a real scene. Unfortunately, that is a real haircut. And that's when Stu Ullman, Bill, was it Watson or Walton, whatever his name is, walks up and joins them. And at that point now we're in the real scene. We then go back to them talking. Dick Halloran are talking, and this whole scene is fictitious. This is all made up. Do you know how I knew your name was Doc? Yeah, because my father's writing the book in his head, and that's how you know. But anyway, so that's what's really going on. Now, there's all kinds of hints to all this. You could sit there and say, Dave, you're crazy. It's not a bad theory. It's this, it's that. When they first get to the hotel, they're going to ask Jack where the luggage is. And he points to it and says, oh, it's right there. And you can see Danny's big wheel. Well, Danny's big wheel has a blue seat. It's white and has 2 red bells on each handlebars. Tell me why in the movie when Danny is riding the bike, it's now red and only has 1 bell. Because it's Jack writing it in his book. Because it never happened. Now, there's all kinds of crazy theories. You can go watch a movie called like Room 237, which is like everyone's crazy theories on the movie. And, you know, some people think that Kubrick was involved in the moon landing. That was a very popular belief back then. And I believe in one scene, Stanley Kubrick addresses it. Danny's wearing the Apollo 11 shirt when the balls roll to him mysteriously from nowhere right before he goes to Room 237. He stands up. But what I'm saying is here, this scene is a fake scene. Kubrick is tipping his hat saying, yeah, all this story about Apollo is fake. It's nonsense. It's not real. It's not to be believed. All the stuff, basically once Jack wears the red jacket, we're all in fake land. But let's look at some other facts. He's using a white, I think it's an Adler typewriter. It's a very small typewriter. And there's a big piece on the same table, this big wood complex thing. The typewriter is going to turn to black And for the rest of the movie, or dark gray, he's using this black typewriter because this is the fictitious Jack. And also this huge sculpture is gone from the room. All of a sudden, Jack, Wendy, and Danny figure out how to move this 1-ton wood structure out of... I mean, it's just nuts. Things are constantly going to be switching from when he's writing it, because he's writing it. That's what's going on. To give you an example, when Jack is in the room getting interviewed with Stu Ullman 10 years ago, which would have been 1970 if you're watching the movie from the time it was released. I think he says 1970. Charles Grady murdered his 2 daughters, his wife, and then took a shotgun, a double-barrel shotgun. I believe the older people call it cabin fever. Yeah, I believe everyone calls it cabin fever. I mean, it's so ridiculous, Stu Ullman. Anyways, when he goes and meets Grady in the bathroom, it's from like the 1920s, and his name is Delbert Grady. Well, why was his name changed? His name changed because Jack's a writer. You can change the guy's name. That's what he's doing. There's also so many things with Lloyd going on. When he goes to sit down, he's sitting down way further down the bar, and then all of a sudden he's really close up the bar. Why would Kubrick make such a mistake and change his seat 5 or 6 seats up the bar? He didn't. He's showing you that Jack's writing it. Anytime something changes in a scene where you think it's a gleaming mistake is merely the fact of Kubrick tipping his hat to you saying, this is Jack's mind. The red jacket is all Jack in his mind. That's the whole story. Basically, I'd say about halfway through the movie, we're stuck in the story. We're now in the story of Jack because there's really nothing to tell in the house. Everything from that point on is fake. And of course, if it was a film made by like M. Night Shyamalan, a Ding Dong, or then you would have tipped the hand at the end. This is no different than like a Sixth Sense type movie, except they're not tipping the hand at the end. Just imagine if the Sixth Sense were filmed and then at the very end you don't find out that Bruce Willis is dead the whole time. You'd be like, what the hell? And it's almost very much like Big Fish. Big Fish was the story of a kid retelling his father's stories, and he didn't believe that they were true, and then somehow there's some truth to it. But it's the same type of thing where like Kubrick is to Kubrick this is far scarier because he's telling his story that he can buy into it, he can believe it because it's not a ghost story that traditional ghost story. And like I said, there are so many gleaming mistakes that you would, once you realize that they're not mistakes and that he's doing this on purpose, it really makes the movie enjoyable to watch. Now, like I said, you're going to watch the scenes that I showed, and then you can make up your mind for yourself. However, for me, this story is the story of Jack Torrance, who's really like Stephen King. He went to a hotel, got an idea from a movie because the guy's giving him basically Stu Ullman's feeding him the story right there and saying what happened to Charles Grady, and Jack continues to go write a story about a guy who comes to a hotel and does exactly what Stu Ullman tells him. There are some other things I just wanted to bring up real quickly. The maze. I don't believe the maze exists. Now, my brother and I discussed this. At first, he was somewhat saying that he did believe the maze was there, but if you see when the maze, in the opening shot, there is no maze. And I believe that part of the tour Jack is writing in his book. I believe the tour he is writing. That little section, because there's a car that disappears out of nowhere that really is just from like one shot. And again, I don't think Stanley Kubrick on a soundstage is going to say, let's get rid of that car like someone's leaving for work. He's not. It's just not, doesn't make sense. So therefore it tells me that this is being written. Later, when Jack is chasing Danny, the entrance to the maze changes from the side to the front. Why make that change? Why completely change the structure of the maze unless you're saying, well, hey, he's writing this. This is, and he's changed it. He changed it because it made his story better. He didn't want to write him that he's writing out. He just wants him running across the front door of the hotel right into the maze. There's so many things that are going on that'll tip it to you. When you watch it, though, I tell you right now, it's not going to be as scary as the first time you saw it and you really think, because when you start to realize that he's writing it and that these are all everything, you know, you'll see all kinds of stuff that change in scenes when he's writing it. Like Danny, when he sees the girls for the first time in the game room, I don't believe that's serious. I think that he said he was in the game. He showed him the game room, and then he wrote this fictitious scene in the game room. But like a minute later, they find Danny outside looking for his parents, and they were like, we just found him outside roaming around. Well, then clearly he wasn't in the game room. Anyways, that's my analysis of The Shining. Like I said, go back and watch it, and then comment. Don't comment before you watch it. Definitely watch it first. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoy the film. It's one of my top 10 movies of all time. And I'll see you next time with some guitar stuff. Very good.
You're right on target. You hit the nail right on the head with your comments, what you're saying.
You're right on the money, everything you said. You're 150% correct. You guys are absolutely correct in what you're saying. And I totally agree with you. You guys are right on, and you're 100% right in what you were stating, and I agree with everything you said. And you're absolutely correct.